The rain wasn't the romantic kind, the sort that mists over movie scenes in New York. It was a cold, biting November drizzle that clung to the city, making the asphalt shine like polished obsidian. It was the kind of rain that found its way under your collar, a persistent, unwelcome chill. Inside my architectural silver gown, however, I felt nothing but a coiled, nervous warmth. Tonight was the culmination of everything. 3 years of my life poured into a vision of steel, glass, and sustainable life. Tonight, the Aurelian Awards would recognize Helios. They would recognize me. I stood before the grand entrance of the Museum of Modern Art, a temple of modern vision. The name felt appropriate. My project, Helios, wasn't just a building. It was a new vision for urban living, a complex that breathed with the city for the city. It had saved a forgotten district. More importantly, it had saved a piece of me. The architectural world was buzzing. My name, Dallas Klein, was on the lips of every critic and journalist. At 32, I was poised to become the youngest recipient of the industry's highest honor. The doorman smiled, a practiced, impersonal gesture. "Good evening, miss," I nodded, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. At the check-in desk, a young woman with a sharp haircut and a sharper expression tapped on her iPad. "Name? Dallas Klein, Vance and Sterling." Her brow furrowed. She scrolled, then scrolled again. "I'm sorry, I don't have a Dallas Klein on the guest list." A laugh caught in my throat, a mistake, it had to be. "Could you check again? I'm the lead architect on the Helios project." "I've checked 3 times, miss, there's no Klein." Her voice was flat bored, she had already dismissed me. The warmth in my chest turned to ice. A cold dread, far more chilling than the rain outside, began to creep up my spine. Just then, a black town car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and Julian Vance emerged, his tailored tuxedo shrugging off the rain effortlessly. He was the senior partner at the firm, a man whose charm was as legendary as his ambition. But he wasn't alone. On his arm was Isabella Rossi, a junior designer who had joined the firm less than 18 months ago, her blonde hair catching the light like a halo. Julian's eyes found mine. There was no surprise in them, only a cool, calculating acknowledgement. He placed a proprietary hand on the small of Isabella's back, guiding her toward the entrance. Isabella feigned a gasp of surprise. "Dallas, I didn't expect to see you here." Her voice was a confection of sweet poison. Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Dallas, this is an exclusive event, you understand. Key partners and the faces of the firm's future." He gestured vaguely at the grand hall behind him. Capacity issues. Capacity issues at MoMA. The lie was so blatant it was insulting. Then Isabella leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was intentionally loud enough for me and the now curious check-in girl to hear. "It would just be so awkward if you were inside. I'm the one presenting the vision for Helios tonight. This is my moment." My moment. The words echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of my mind. My sleepless nights, my sketches on napkins at 3 a.m., my battles with city planners, my very soul poured into blueprints and models, she was calling it her moment. I looked from her beaming, triumphant face to Julian's impassive mask. I saw the entire sordid picture. It wasn't a mistake. It was a coup. A strange calm washed over me. The frantic drumming in my chest slowed to a steady, heavy beat. I gave them a smile, a brittle, professional thing that felt like glass. "I see. Well, have a successful evening." I turned and walked away, my silver gown whispering against the wet pavement. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked to the edge of the covered entrance, just out of their line of sight, and stood in the shadows. Through the massive glass walls of the museum, I could see the glittering crowd, the champagne flutes, the self-congratulatory smiles. I watched as Isabella, glowing in a borrowed spotlight, took the stage. Behind her, on a 20-foot screen, were my designs. My 3D renderings. My vision. I saw my soul projected for the world to see, and someone else was claiming it. I saw Julian raise a glass to her, the prodigy he had discovered. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A message from Leo Martinez, my former colleague. "They scrubbed your name from the Helios mainframe. All technical files now list Rossi as lead architect." "I'm so sorry, Dallas." The ice in my veins began to burn. 5 minutes I stood there, watching the pantomime of my own success. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. But then it began to change. The grief began to curdle, sharpening into something harder, something colder. Rage, another buzz, this time from a leaner Vance, Julian's own cousin, pushed out of the firm months ago. Lawyer confirmed. "His IP fraud nullifies your non-compete clause. We are clear. It's time." A valet approached me cautiously. "Ma'am, can I call you a car?" I looked at the glowing screen in my hand, at Aliner's message. I looked back through the window at the thieves celebrating their spoils. The rules were never made to protect people like me. They were made to be broken by people like him. I had played by those rules my entire career. Tonight, I was done playing. Not yet, I told the valet. I opened my email, my fingers steady. There was a draft, one I had prepared weeks ago, hoping I would never have to use it. The subject line was simple: Operation True North. I hit send. And through the glass, I watched the beginning of the end. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was the final, most audacious act in a 5-year war of attrition on my career. I joined Vance and Sterling fresh out of grad school, a prodigy with a portfolio full of daring designs and a naive belief in meritocracy. My first year, I untangled the mess of the Weaver's Bridge project, a pedestrian bridge that was over budget and behind schedule. I found the flaw in its structural engineering, redesigned its suspension system on a weekend, and saved the firm millions. At the presentation to the city council, Julian presented my work as a collaborative leadership effort he had spearheaded. I got a small bonus and a pat on the back. Julian got a feature in Forbes. The pattern was set. Year 2, I redesigned a public library, incorporating biometric data to create personalized reading spaces and cutting energy costs by 30%. Julian took the credit. Year 3, I saved a commercial retail project from collapse by redesigning its entire traffic flow system. Julian accepted the award. He was a master curator of other people's talent, a charismatic parasite who was brilliant at one thing: selling a story. And for 5 years, the story he sold was built on my work. He never stole everything at once. It was a slow, methodical erosion. He'd praise my genius in private while minimizing my role in public. He'd call my ideas promising and then present them as his own strategic vision weeks later. His favorite phrase was "we." We felt the design needed a more organic flow. We decided to pivot to a more sustainable model. We, of course, meant him. My contribution was implied, but my name was slowly, surely erased. Isabella Rossi was his masterstroke. She wasn't an architect, she was a prop. The daughter of a major real estate investor, she had ambition that far outstripped her talent. Julian took her under his wing and taught her what he called strategic positioning. It was a euphemism for attaching her name to my work. The manipulation became more overt. First, I was taken off client meetings. "I need you focused on the core design, Dallas. Let me handle the sales pitch," Julian would say, his voice oozing with false sincerity. Then Isabella became my designated liaison. My reports and updates had to go through her. Soon, her name started appearing on presentation decks, initially next to mine, then eventually above it. Helios was meant to be my declaration of independence. It was a project so personal, so complex, that I thought it was untouchable. I spent 2 years on research alone, traveling, studying ancient aqueducts and modern smart cities. I developed new sustainable materials in my own apartment on my own time. I poured my inheritance into funding the initial environmental impact studies. Helios was more than a building. It was my philosophy made manifest. When the concept won the preliminary approval from the city, I cried with relief. I thought, finally, this is something he can't steal. I was wrong. A week before the Aurelian Gala, Julian called me into his glass-walled office. "Dallas," he'd said, his face a mask of solemn concern. "We've decided Isabella will be the face of Helios at the awards. She has a fresh energy, a modern appeal that resonates with the new board. It's about the optics." The optics. I later discovered my name had been quietly removed from the architectural patents a month prior. My work, my masterpiece, had been legally laundered and handed to a fraud. That was the moment I stopped being a victim and started planning a war. The email I sent from the curb of MoMA wasn't just an email. It was a coordinated, multi-front assault, the culmination of 4 months of clandestine planning. Operation True North was born in a quiet coffee shop in Brooklyn, with the 3 other people Julian had tried to erase. Leo Martinez was the first person I called. A brilliant structural engineer, Julian had fired him for refusing to sign off on substandard materials for a high-rise project, an act that saved lives but cost the firm a lucrative contract. Leo was our technical ghost. He knew the firm's digital infrastructure, its security flaws, its hidden archives. For months, he had been my eyes and ears inside their servers, meticulously documenting the digital trail of my work and how it had been systematically rebranded under Isabella's name. He built a secure, untraceable server where we stored our evidence, a digital fortress of truth. Then came Eleanor Vance. As Julian's cousin, she had grown up in his shadow, and when she joined the firm in client relations, she was an asset until her integrity became a liability. Julian pushed her out when she refused to lie to a major client about project delays, but Eleanor never lost her connections. She maintained quiet relationships with the executives and investors who had been charmed by Julian but were growing wary of his inconsistent results. She was our diplomat, our inside channel to the people who held the purse strings. She knew which clients were unhappy, which contracts were unstable. She was our surgical strike. Our final piece was Ben Carter, a quiet forensic accountant from the finance department. Ben had watched Julian siphon money from projects for years, inflating budgets and using shell companies owned by his friends as subcontractors. Ben was forced into early retirement after he started asking too many questions. For the past year, he had been building a case on his own, a detailed map of Julian's financial crimes. He was our nuclear option. We called ourselves the Vindicators. 4 ghosts united by a common enemy. We worked in secret, meeting in borrowed apartments and late-night diners, piecing together an arsenal of evidence. My contribution was the core of it all, a secret, encrypted hard drive containing every sketch, every email, every metadata log, and every version history of my work for the past 5 years. I had proof of authorship that was ironclad. While Julian was busy erasing my name from the present, I was busy cementing it in the past. But our plan wasn't just about exposing a thief. It was about building a better alternative. While secretly gathering evidence, I was also secretly creating my new firm. I called it Ethelgard Designs. Ethelgard, an old name meaning noble protector. We weren't just going to tear Julian down, we were going to build something new on his ruins. And our flagship project would be Helios Prime. Helios Prime was the version of Helios that lived in my head, the one without compromises, the one with the innovations Julian had deemed too expensive or too complex. I had secured the provisional patents under my own name. I had consulted with a top-tier intellectual property lawyer, a woman who specialized in destroying non-compete agreements. Her conclusion was swift and decisive. Julian's systematic fraud constituted a material breach of my employment contract, rendering the non-compete clause utterly void. I was a free agent. The strategy was precise, timed to the minute. The assault was scheduled for 11:59 p.m., the moment the gala ended, ensuring maximum chaos and minimum response time from Julian's camp. There were 5 emails in that draft, each a digital warhead aimed at a different pillar of Julian's empire. The first was for 5 of the top real estate CEOs in the country, including 2 of Julian's biggest clients. The subject line, Helios Prime, the original vision from the chief architect. It contained a stunning presentation of the superior version of the project and the biographies of my team, the true creators of Vance and Sterling's most successful projects. The second was for 12 of the most influential publications in architecture and business. The subject, Ethelgard Designs launches, helmed by the mastermind behind Helios. It was a press release, professionally written, that announced my new firm without explicitly mentioning Vance and Sterling, but the implication would be unmistakable to anyone in the industry. The third was for the board of directors of Vance and Sterling. The subject, Urgent Notification, Intellectual Property Liabilities and Legal Exposure. Attached was an 80-page dossier, meticulously compiled by our team, detailing every stolen project, every fraudulent claim, and every financial discrepancy, complete with evidence. The fourth was for the American Institute of Architects. The subject, Formal Complaint Regarding Ethical Violations and Intellectual Property Fraud. This was a direct challenge to Julian's professional license, a move that could end his career permanently. The fifth and final email was for 35 current and former employees of Vance and Sterling, talented people who had been marginalized, exploited, or fired by Julian. The subject, A New Home for True Builders. It was a recruitment letter, an invitation to join a place where talent was honored, not harvested. But standing there, watching the live feed of the awards on a journalist's phone outside the gala, I saw Julian and Isabella on the red carpet, laughing at a reporter's question. Then Leo's text came in. Video of them mocking you in the green room just leaked on the company's internal chat. Everyone has seen it. I looked at the time. 10:52 p.m. Why wait? Why play by my own rules when they had never played by any? My revenge didn't need to be polite. It needed to be swift. It needed to be total. I pressed send. 8 minutes before they were scheduled to announce the award for Project of the Year. 8 minutes before Julian and Isabella would have accepted my award. The digital warheads were launched, and in the silent, rainy New York night, I felt the first tremor of a collapsing empire. For a moment, there was only the sound of the rain and the distant hum of city traffic. Nothing happened. A terrifying, split second of doubt washed over me. Did it fail? Did it go to spam? Then my phone, clutched in my hand, came alive. It didn't buzz once. It began to vibrate continuously, a frantic, unceasing tremor against my palm. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, a digital tidal wave, a LinkedIn notification. James Morrison, CEO of Meridian Properties, has viewed your profile. An email preview from Architectural Digest RE, interview request. Another, Richmond Capital would like to schedule an urgent meeting. They came in a dizzying, relentless cascade, one blurring into the next. My plan wasn't a quiet document sent into the void. It was a detonation, and I was standing at ground zero, feeling the shockwave through a 5-inch screen. I looked up, back through the glass wall of the museum. The party was still in full swing, an oblivious tableau of success and champagne, but I saw the first sign. A man at a table near the window, a senior board member I recognized, glanced down at his phone. His polite smile froze. He excused himself from his conversation, his eyes glued to his screen as he walked quickly towards the exit. Then another phone lit up, and another. A subtle virus of information was spreading through the room, unseen but potent. My eyes found Julian. He was still holding court near the stage, Isabella laughing at his side, a sparkling trophy he was eager to display. He was a king in his castle, completely unaware that the walls were already crumbling. I watched as his chief of staff hurried over and whispered something in his ear. Julian waved him away, annoyed by the interruption. The aide insisted, his expression grim. Julian, with a sigh of theatrical impatience, finally pulled out his own phone. I will never forget the sequence of emotions that played across his face, even from 50 feet away. First, annoyance. Then, confusion as he read the first few lines of an email. His brow furrowed. His smile vanished. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly, pale shock. He looked up, his eyes darting wildly around the room as if searching for the source of the attack. Finally, his gaze locked with mine through the rain-slicked glass. There it was, the moment of recognition. The instant he knew it was me. The arrogant confidence shattered, replaced by a raw, naked panic. He started towards the door, Isabella trailing behind him, her laughter replaced by a confused pout. I didn't wait for the confrontation. That wasn't part of the plan. My victory wasn't in a shouting match on the steps of Moe. It was in the quiet, irreversible execution of his demise. I turned my back on the chaos and walked calmly to the curb where a car I had pre-ordered was waiting. The engine was running. As I slid into the back seat, the warmth of the leather was a welcome comfort. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. "The address I entered," I said, my voice even. "Take your time." As the car pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself one last look. Julian had burst through the doors, shouting my name, the sound lost to the glass and the rain. He looked small and powerless, a king without a kingdom. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel hatred. I felt a profound and chilling sense of peace. The war was over. I had won. The car moved through the glittering, rain-swept streets of Manhattan. Each drop of water that slid down the window seemed to be washing away 5 years of quiet humiliation, of stifled anger, of stolen dreams. The noise from my phone was incessant, but I silenced it, placing it face down on the seat beside me. The storm I had unleashed could rage on without my immediate attention. For the first time in a long time, my mind was quiet. The address I had given the driver wasn't my apartment. It was a small, temporary office space we had rented under a shell company name in the meatpacking district. When I walked in, the Vindicators were already there, gathered around a large monitor, their faces illuminated by the glow of data streams and news feeds. The room was buzzing with a quiet, focused energy. This was our command center. Leo Martinez was at the keyboard, his fingers flying. "The internal Slack at Vance and Sterling is in total meltdown," he said without looking up. "They've locked down most of the channels, but it's too late. The dossier is already everywhere." He pointed to a scrolling feed on the screen. Anonymous employees were posting. I knew it. My work on the Kensington Tower was stolen by him too. Another read, Isabella Rossi couldn't design a cardboard box. It was a digital insurrection. Eleanor Vance was on her phone, a wide grin on her face. That was James Morrison's chief of staff. He called Julian's desperate offer to cut their fees by 40% insulting. They want a meeting with you, Dallas, tomorrow morning. 9. They're prepared to terminate their contract with Vance and Sterling. Ben Carter, our quiet accountant, simply pointed to another screen. It showed the stock ticker for Vance and Sterling's biggest institutional investor. It was already starting to dip in after hours trading. The board has called an emergency session for midnight, he said softly. The general counsel has issued a company-wide email instructing no one to delete or destroy any documents. The panic is official. My team, my ghosts, they weren't just my allies, they were my proof. Proof that this wasn't just my story. It was the story of everyone Julian had stepped on to climb his ladder of success. Then, my personal phone, which I had placed on the table, began to ring. The caller ID read, Julian Vance. We all looked at it. I let it go to voicemail. Few seconds later, a notification popped up. A new message. I put it on speaker. Julian's voice was a ragged, desperate rasp, all the smooth charisma stripped away. Dallas, pick up. Listen, there's been a misunderstanding. A terrible, terrible misunderstanding. We can fix this. Whatever you want. You want to be a partner, you're a partner. Executive VP of Operations. Double your salary, triple it, just call off the dogs. Stop this. You're burning down the whole goddamn world. The message ended. We sat in silence for a moment. He still thinks he can buy you, Leo said, shaking his head. He thinks the world revolves around him, Alina corrected. He doesn't realize it's not his world anymore. The phone rang again. This time it was Isabella. I answered. You bitch! The shriek was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. You sociopathic, scheming bitch, you've ruined me, my career is over, my life is over. I waited for her to finish her tirade, a storm of sobs and curses. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice calm and low. You never had a career, Isabella. You had proximity to other people's work. There's a difference. My father will sue you into oblivion. Will he? I asked. Ben, does her father's company, Rossi Holdings, benefit from any of the inflated subcontractor invoices you found? Ben glanced at his spreadsheet. They're the primary beneficiary of the Helios budget overruns, to the tune of about $7 million. I imagine the SEC would find that very interesting. I relayed this information to Isabella. The silence on the other end of the line was more satisfying than her screaming. I continued. And I'd be careful what you say. Your employment contract has a very strict clause about non-disparagement. You're violating it. Goodbye, Isabella. I hung up. The final hour of the night was a blur of activity. The Architectural Digest article went live with the headline, Helios Mastermind Exits Firm, Launches Competitor on Awards Night. TechCrunch followed with, How to Lose Your Top Talent and Your Biggest Client in Under an Hour. The story was no longer just an industry rumor, it was a public execution. At 2 a.m., an email came through from a sender I didn't recognize. It was from Evelyn Marshall, the chairwoman of the board at Vance and Sterling, who is currently in Tokyo. The email was short. She expressed her profound shock and horror at the contents of the dossier. She didn't apologize. Instead, she offered me a lucrative consulting contract to help them navigate this crisis and restructure the firm's creative leadership. It was another attempt to buy my silence, to bring me back into the fold to clean up their mess. It was the last gasp of the old guard. I began to type my reply. I refused her offer. I told her the firm didn't need a consultant, it needed a conscience. I told her to look at the talent she already had, the brilliant minds Julian had buried in middle management. I gave her a name. Michael Reeves, a quiet, unassuming but brilliant architect who I knew had been responsible for at least 3 major innovations Julian had claimed as his own. Promote him, I wrote. Trust the people you already have. Start there. I hit send. It was the first brick I laid in the foundation of my new world. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reconstruction. The dawn that broke over New York that weekend felt different. The rain had passed, leaving behind a clean, sharp, impossibly bright sky. The air itself felt new. Our temporary office, which had been a war room, slowly transformed into the birthplace of a company. The frantic energy of the night settled into a hum of focused creation. We weren't just reacting anymore, we were building. Monday morning at precisely 9 a.m., my team and I walked into the conference room at Meridian Properties. James Morrison and his executive team were already waiting. There was no tension, no skepticism. They looked at us, a small group of 4 in a borrowed meeting space, and they saw the future. They had read the dossier. They had seen the news. They understood. Your Helios Prime concept, Morrison said, skipping all pleasantries, is what we thought we were buying in the first place. The sustainability metrics, the integrated community spaces, that's the vision that sold us. Not the watered-down version Vance has been trying to push on us for the past 6 months. The meeting lasted less than an hour. By the end of it, we had a handshake agreement on a 3-year, $50 million contract to develop Helios Prime. It was more than just a contract, it was a validation. It was the market choosing authenticity over illusion. As we left their gleaming tower, Aliner's phone rang. It was the CEO of Richmond Capital. They wanted to be next. We were back in our office, planning our next steps when there was a knock on the door. It was Julian. He looked like a ghost of the man I'd seen at the gala. His tuxedo was gone, replaced by a rumpled suit. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale and drawn. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out desperation. "Dallas," he croaked, his voice raw. "We need to talk." I remained seated. My team stood behind me, a silent wall of support. "There's nothing to talk about, Julian." "Please," he begged, and the word seemed to cost him everything. "I'll do anything. The AIA is opening a formal investigation. The board is forcing me to take a leave of absence. My career, my life, it's over. Just make it stop. Retract the complaint." I looked at him, at this man who had built an empire on the foundations of other people's dreams, and I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a vast, empty distance. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. He was no longer the king, and I was no longer the pawn. "I won't retract anything," I said, my voice steady. "You did this, but I will offer you a single path to mitigate the damage." A flicker of hope in his eyes. "Anything." "It has nothing to do with me," I said. "This is about the people you harmed. First, you will issue a public, formal apology to every employee whose work you claimed as your own. You will name them, and you will name their contributions." He flinched, but nodded. "Second," I continued, "you will use your own personal funds to establish a $50,000 scholarship fund at Columbia's School of Architecture. It will be called the Vindicators Grant, and it will be awarded annually to a promising student from a low-income background." He stared at me aghast. He was expecting a negotiation, a financial settlement. He didn't understand. This was never about money. "And third," I said, delivering the final blow, "you will publicly announce your immediate and permanent retirement from the practice of architecture. You will disappear, and if you do those 3 things, I will not pursue civil litigation for damages." He looked from my face to the faces of my team. He saw no weakness, no room for negotiation. He saw the end of the line. He sagged, a puppet with his strings cut. "All right," he whispered. He turned and walked out, not a titan of industry, but a defeated old man. The fallout was swift and total. On Tuesday, the AIA announced the suspension of Julian's license pending their full investigation. On Wednesday, we got an unexpected visitor. It was Isabella's father, Robert Rossi. He was a formidable man, but he didn't come with lawyers or threats. He came with an apology. "My daughter. She was foolish," he said, his voice heavy. "She was manipulated by Vance, but she also made her own choices. I've reviewed the documents your team sent to my board. The evidence of fraud is undeniable." He then announced he was pulling all of Rossi Holdings' investments from Vance and Sterling and terminating their contracts. Before he left, he handed me a check. It was a personal investment of $2 million. "For Ethelgard Designs," he said, "I invest in integrity." I should have done my due diligence sooner. By the end of the first week, Ethelgard Designs had signed 7 contracts with a total annual value of over $30 million. We had received resumes from over 50 employees at Vance and Sterling. We leased the entire 14th floor of a new building downtown, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the entire city. Our new home. The final piece of Julian's world crumbled 2 weeks later when he issued a press release announcing his retirement, citing personal reasons. The apology was posted online, and the Vindicators Grant was quietly established. Julian Vance was gone. Michael Reeves, the man I had recommended, was appointed as the interim head of design at the struggling Vance and Sterling. A quiet, decent man was finally getting his chance. 6 months later, I stood on the construction site of Helios Prime. The skeleton of the first tower was rising against the blue sky, a testament of steel and resolve. The air smelled of sawdust and fresh concrete, the scent of creation. Around me, a team of 30 brilliant architects, engineers, and designers, my team, worked with a shared sense of purpose. All of them were people who, like me, had once been overlooked or undervalued. Here, they were celebrated. I realized then that the best revenge wasn't watching your enemy fall. It was building the world they tried to steal from you and building it better. It was the success that rendered their existence irrelevant. My anger, the cold, sharp thing that had fueled me that night, was gone. In its place was something warmer, more enduring: purpose. Back in our office, a young architectural intern approached my desk, her expression nervous, holding a tablet with a sketch on it. "Ms. Klein, I have an idea for the community garden atrium. It's a little unconventional, but..." I looked at her, and I saw a reflection of myself from years ago, full of hope and a little bit of fear. I smiled, a genuine, easy smile. "Don't be shy," I said, gesturing for her to come closer. "Show me what you've got." As she began to explain her brilliant, unconventional idea, my desk phone rang. The screen displayed the name of a potential new client, a city planner from Chicago looking to revitalize a stretch of their lakefront. I held up a finger to my new colleague, letting her know I was listening to her. Then I picked up the receiver. The future was calling. "Ethelgard Designs, Dallas speaking," I said, my voice clear and bright. "What future can we build for you today?"